now, Westwood One presents
John here, this is Paul, George, and Ringo.
The Beatle Years.
She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. And Bobby love. She said, I know what it's like to be dead.
Hello, I'm J.J. Jackson. This week we're going to spend some quality time with Geoffrey Giuliano, author of the controversial book Lennon in America, 1971 through 1980. Giuliano claims that some of the source material was culled from both written and audio journals kept by John Lennon. However, there are no direct quotes, and the reader has no idea if the context is properly represented. There are also fantastic allegations of Lennon beating Yoko, shunning Sean, sex with Linda McCartney, and a sexual encounter with Stu Sutcliffe. With that said, let's meet Geoffrey Giuliano.
I was a lonely little boy who was kind of woken up, generally speaking, by the Beatles and the Stones and Donovan and the Moody Blues and a lot of those kinds of people. I was 12 in 1967, and I was a little intellectually precocious, so I used to like to do what the big boys did. And in 1967, we all know what the big boys were doing. They were dropping acid, and I took some, and that also helped to wake me up a little bit. And before the Beatles and acid and all that, I was like a nerd. Brush cut and braces on my teeth and camp shorts and a Swiss Army knife, and dreamed about astronauts. After that, I started reading books about Indian philosophy and meditation and revolution and all that stuff, and it was really an exciting time to be young. I was a little too young, actually. I did all the university thing and got a master's degree in acting, and believe it or not, was Ronald McDonald on the television commercials for Canada. Prior to that, I was the Marvelous Magical Burger King, doing shows all around, like a vaudevillian type show all around the Cape. And that was very interesting because I am an ethical vegetarian. At the time, I thought, well, I'm an actor. I'm just out of drama school, and this is just a job. It doesn't really matter that I don't think people should eat meat. It's okay to do this because it's a job. I mean, actors don't have to necessarily believe in the philosophy behind the character they're playing. But after a year, that started to wear thin, and I left. And since that time, I've used that bully pulpit to talk about animal rights and ethics. And so I'm interested in that. I spend a lot of time in India. I go twice a year. I have a charity I founded called the Spiritual Realization Institute, and we have several programs in which we actively feed people, vegetarian food, of course. And to me, that is an actualization of the Beatle politic that we all heard as young people, because inherent and within that music, and this is the most important part of that music to me, is a message. And that message, if you listen to it carefully and take it to heart, tends to widen one's sphere of responsibility. And so I've tried to live up to that, and I also try to live up to that challenge laid down by the Beatles in my work. And I know some people may find that a contradiction. But, you know, my idea is that everything should be truthful. And no matter what that truth is, that we have no right to play with the truth. And I think the truth is just far more interesting than spin. And I've tried to tell the truth in my book, Lennon in America. Besides that, I'm a 46-year-old, slightly arthritic father of 4 children and 2 grandchildren that doesn't wear shoes most of the time, and basically treads water financially in the U.S. until I can pull together enough money and the monsoon stops so I can go back to England and live in the foothills of the headlands. No, that's Yellow Submarine. The foothills of the Himalayas there in Rishikesh and other places in UP, and also now recently Kathmandu is a favorite. And that's me.
Well, the next question posed to Geoffrey was why did he wait almost 20 years after Lennon's death to publish this essay that many fans and close friends feel goes out of its way to assassinate the character of John Lennon?
Paperback
I wasn't equipped to write this book earlier. I didn't have the clout in the industry for anyone to listen to me to get the book off the ground because everybody was afraid of Yoko Ono's deep pockets. The other dynamic was that in my personal life, I didn't really feel up to it because I knew that it would be hell. I knew it'd be a problem for me on one level. Let's see. There's several legal reasons, personal reasons. Well, I also needed to get more research together because I didn't think it was fair to simply write the book predicated on only the diaries. I wanted to round out my research. And over the past 20 years, I have had a chance to speak to those intimate with the Beatles. And I cite in my book 37 key interviews that I conducted on tape over the years, not specifically for this book, but in generic interviews, which, when put together in reference to this book, all sort of helped to put the puzzle together. That was one thing. When I wrote the book, John Lennon, My Brother, with Julia Baird in 1984, I believe it was, I went over to Liverpool and I met all the dying uncles and aunties. And they had gotten lots and lots and lots of letters from John. He typed quite a bit towards the end of his life. So Lennon had sent these letters over, and they gave me photocopies. So I got about a 3-inch stack of photocopied letters, and that was immensely helpful. And then subsequent to that, also through the family, I got some audio journals. Now, I know Elliot Mintz has said recently that John kept no audio journals. Well, that's very interesting, as I, have possession of copies of some of them. Also, I was just reading last night, coincidentally, a little snippet from the very last page of the 1979 diary, in which Lennon says, "Can't find my audio journals." So, anyway, those are some of the reasons.
Geoffrey claims to have received copies of Lennon's written diaries from the late Harry Nilsson. Many dispute this, and up next, you can decide for yourselves. Stay tuned. I'm J.J. Jackson, back with author Geoffrey Giuliano on the Beatle years.
Brother bought a coconut, he bought it for the dime. His sister had another one, she paid it for the lime. She put the lime in the coconut.
One of the key issues of Giuliano's Lennon in America is the fact that it is supposedly written with the help of John Lennon's lost diaries. Well, they were never lost, but stolen. In 1983, Lennon's former personal assistant Fred Seaman pled guilty to second-degree grand theft larceny. He claimed his reasons for absconding with the journals was because John Lennon had told him to turn them over to Julian. Somehow, Albert Goldman, author of The Lives of John Lennon, got a hold of them. In fact, in many ways, Geoffrey's book at times parallels Goldman's accounts word for word. Yet Geoffrey maintains he came upon the questioned documents by way of Harry Nilsson.
First of all, I was running around the world interviewing everybody. I mean, just everybody and anybody, next door neighbors, milkmen, right up to Yoko Ono and Paul McCartney, who had anything to do with the Beatles. For years I did this, and we know this if you ever seen any of those audio things I've done, that I've got all these interviews. And I had interviewed Harry, and as so often happens, sometimes when you interview someone, there's a little bit of a spark, and I'm a bit of a character, and he was certainly a character. And we had some drinks, and there was a little bit of a camaraderie. I won't even say friendship, but a camaraderie that evolved. And from that, off tape, and I actually did an interview with Harry the day that this was all discussed, but this was certainly off tape, and he requested it to be off tape. Anyway, we'd finished the interview. And he said to me, "Listen, I have copies of John's diaries," because I think there was something in the news about that at that time, or maybe, can't say that for sure. But anyway, he mentioned that, and I was, of course, intrigued, and prodded him a little. And anyway, I got to the point where he said, "Well, if you think you might be able to they would help you in some way with your work, then maybe, I could possibly, have to think about it, but maybe send you a copy." And I thought that was total BS. I thought it was just beer talk. And, it was a very late night, and there was a lot of drinks, and I thought he was just kind of popping off at the mouth. And then about 3 weeks later, I got this manila envelope from Arizona, where I think he was staying at that time, somewhere out there. And there they were, photocopies.
There's just one problem. The journals in Giuliano's possession are typewritten, and it's common knowledge that John kept handwritten journals. Here's Geoffrey with his explanation.
Here we go again.
Oh, no. The journals originally were handwritten, there's no question. But a transcript was made. Now, some people say, aha, transcript. That means you got the Fred Seaman version via Robert Rosen, who sat there in his apartment and made a transcript. And all I can tell you is what Harry told me. I know nothing more about it. God is my witness. He said to me that John, first of all, was thinking about doing an autobiography, and I will say that to back that up, a bit of that came out as skywriting by word of mouth, a bit of that. That was part of much, much larger work. Anyone who was around Lennon will tell you that. They just sort of edited it down and from his papers, and they put that out. There was also something called The Real Ballad of John and Yoko. Fred Seaman said that he saw the script for that. That was a Broadway play that they had written, which was autobiographical. Well, when all this was going on at the same time, the Broadway play, script, the skywriting by word of mouth, which wasn't called that, but later was, all this was happening, John, and the diaries every day, and the audio diaries. John was, which he did not do every day. Elliot's right in one sense, that the main thing were the written, but he did do the audio journals. I have them. So anyway, all this was happening. John was sitting there alone, didn't have much work to do, thinking about his life, and he was considering, as Harry told me, to do a very kind of almost formal autobiography. And John had told him that he had given a transcript to about 3 people. I suspect another person is May Pang. And indeed, Harry got one. And why? Because John had requested that these people, 3 people, one of them being Harry, it's the only one I know for sure, would look this over and get back to John. And John was too close to it. He wanted some feedback from a friend. John died. Harry had them in his papers, and subsequently he gave me a copy. But I do have about 3 or 4 pages that are handwritten.
As Geoffrey had stated, Harry did enjoy talking it up. That's why Harry's widow Una and Nilsson attorney Lee Blackman have reservations that Harry ever had possession or ever made photocopies. Plus the fact that after Harry's death in 1994, no, and I stress no, such documents were found.
Let me tell you something, my friend. There are many things in Harry Nilsson's life that both his wife and his attorney didn't know. Like, one of them my wife brought up to me when that came out in the paper, was that he kept trying to put his hand up my wife's dress through the entire time we were there together that night in that bar. We were there with Terry Southern too, by the way. And come on, I call my attorney when I have a problem. I mean, I don't call my attorney. Well, who's going to call their attorney and tell them everything in their life? I don't really think that is such a great philosophical point. He didn't tell his attorney. Now let's look at his. So I blow that. I dismiss that one. Now let's look at the wife.
Whoa! Before we get to Mrs. Nilsson, it should be pointed out that Blackman and Harry were very close friends, even before there was a professional relationship. Blackman stated that as much as he and Harry partied together, it's amazing that John Lennon's diaries never came up.
Yeah, so? Well, I don't know. Maybe he's lying. Maybe the guy's lying. Listen, Mrs. Harry Nilsson readily admitted to the reporter that spoke to her recently about this, that she's almost best friends with Yoko Ono. I have written a very critical book about Yoko Ono Lennon. I have no love for this person, nor Elliot Mintz, nor any of those people up there in the Dakota, or those in Rockefeller Center that oversee the legal remnants of John's cultural legacy. So, I mean, they're going to like me? They're going to want to support me? No, it's a smear campaign. I mean, they're playing the media because that's the game they know how to do. To me, I know the truth. It doesn't hold any water with me. And thankfully, at 46, I'm at a place in my life where I don't really care. So I'm not going to come on Westwood One or anywhere else and sit here and defend my book like I'm on trial. It's a Scopes monkey trial or something. It's like, you don't like the book? Don't buy it.
My intentions are good, I use my intuition, it takes me for a ride. But I never understood other people's superstitions. It seemed like suicide. As I play the game of life, I try to make it better each and every day. And when I struggle in the night, the magic of the music seems to light the way.
It's also Nilsson attorney Lee Blackman's intuition that questions the authenticity of Giuliano's claims.
Well, they can question all they want, you know. I mean, let me ask you this: if they think the journals are phony, then why are they trying to subpoena me to get me into court to produce these in connection with Fred Seaman's lawsuit? Why have they subpoenaed and are in the process of deposing members of my publishing house, Cooper Square Press in New York? It seems like we have a kind of duplicitous stance there with the Lennon estate. On one hand, it's so easy to say, oh, it's phony, it's a hoax, and all the people that just, you know, eat that stuff without thinking for themselves can just go away with that thought in their mind and, I suppose, not buy the book. And then we have, on the other hand, them trying to very, very seriously, legally, trying to maneuver to get a look at what I have. And why is that? Because it's so damn true and so damn real that they can't believe I got this stuff.
Up next, challenges and counter-challenges from the parties involved. Don't go away.
I'm sick and tired of hearing things from uptight, short-sighted, narrow-minded hypocrites. All I want is the truth.
Triple J back with more dialogue and investigative discussion with author Geoffrey Giuliano on the Beatle years from Westwood 1. The topic on the table: are the journals in Geoffrey's possession authentic? And if they are, did he really receive them from Harry Nilsson? As Geoffrey had mentioned during the last segment, the John Lennon estate has attempted to subpoena him for his documents. Number 1, to see if they are authentic. And number 2, to ascertain if Giuliano had received them from Fred Seaman, which would be a direct violation of Seaman's court settlement. Geoffrey thinks those accusations are a smokescreen.
That's an excuse. That's an excuse. That's a circuitous maneuver to try to it's called the iron hand and the velvet glove. They use that as an excuse to see what Giuliano's got and how he put this book together, because it's so damn on the money. They can't believe it. Now look, in those journals, in about 5 different places, John Lennon talks about the fact that Elliot Mintz certainly gets on his nerves. You know, he doesn't say, I hate this man. He says, I don't trust him and that he's dangerous. Those are direct quotes, those words. And, you know, you think Elliot Mintz is going to stand for that? Geoffrey Giuliano telling the world what John Lennon really thought about him? No. I mean, he's a PR man. What's he going to do? He's going to make PR. And coming around the back door, they're going to try a little legal crap. But, I mean, I can see through it. You know, you got to understand there's 2 schools of thought here on the John Lennon's last years. There's the John Green, May Pang, Geoffrey Giuliano, Frederick Seaman, Albert Goldman school. And then there's the world according to Yoko Ono, Elliot Mintz, happy school. And I think that we got a lot more hard evidence on our side than theirs, you know? Listen, if they want to, if these diaries are such a hoax, then let them. How about if I meet them somewhere publicly on TV somewhere, and I'll throw down my diaries and they throw down the original journals, and we'll compare them on TV. If they can either ante up or they can get away from the table.
It just so happens that when we spoke with Nilsson attorney Lee Blackman, he asked us to offer Geoffrey that very option. His suggestion was that all of the parties involved meet at a neutral location. Geoffrey would then turn over his documents to a person with no ties to the situation and have the documents compared and analyzed. Then, as a final test, have Geoffrey's documents dusted for fingerprints. In Blackman's mind, if Giuliano's story is true, then his set of documents should have both John Lennon's and Harry Nilsson's prints all over them. So, what was Geoffrey's response to that challenge?
My response is that I don't see any reason. Listen, I've been Jim Heaney'd once. Who's Jim Heaney? Jim Heaney's a two-bit reporter working in a provincial newspaper in Buffalo, New York, who wrote this ridiculous article about my book. I felt that someone in the media should have a chance to look at this source material, which I think was certainly good faith. And I let him look at some of the diaries, and I let him listen to about 10 minutes out of 6 to 8 hours of audio tapes. And then he comes away and says, whatever, that he doesn't think it's that real or something. Kind of real. He can't quite make up his mind. The point is, I don't see how you can listen to 10 minutes of audio journals and out of 8 hours and then say that, these audio journals don't hold water. Listen, as far as I'm concerned, these are people that have an agenda, an obvious agenda. Elliot Mintz makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, I don't know, probably a month, working for Yoko Ono and trying to keep it all squeaky clean. I can't believe a smart guy like you would fall for that crap. I got the audio journals. You can hear it's John's voice, but you can never win. You can never win. If I bring in the audio journals and John says, he had sex with his mother, Yoko says she's, had some lesbian proclivities and this and that, yada, yada, yada. Then the next thing is, not that, Jeff, you're a good guy, you brought in the tapes, we listened to them, we've aired it, and everything's, no, it's, they've been edited. Oh, is it really John? Maybe it's an actor. See, you can't win. I mean, you can't win with people that have already made up their mind before you come to the table. And I guarantee you, folks, Harry Nielsen's lawyer has already made up his mind before he gets to the table. So I'm not gonna, be sucked into the lion's den by people that have had their knives out from day one. If there's somebody, Dan Rather, 2020, 60 Minutes, that wants to look at this stuff in a really controlled, dispassionate way, then I'll do it.
Well, it is our impression that Lee Blackman hasn't already made up his mind. He was just making a request that he had hoped would be congenial to all of those involved in this very touchy situation. And according to Lennon estate attorney Peter Schuchat, Geoffrey, at the time of this writing, had avoided being served the subpoena by claiming Giuliano is no longer his legal name. It's also our opinion that it's impossible for either Yoko Ono or Elliot Mintz to defend themselves without knowing the true source of these aforementioned ledgers. No matter whose side you take on the issue, we think that it's a sorry state of affairs that after getting together with John over 33 years ago, Yoko still has no peace from the many that seem to go out of their way to discredit her relationship with John.
Standing in the dockets of Hampton, trying to get to Holland or France. The man in the Mac says you've gotta go back. They didn't even give us a chance. Christ, it ain't easy. How hard it can be. The way things are going, they're gonna crucify me. Finally made the plane into Paris.
Up next, a quick game of Where Did That Come From? Keep it here.
You had me, but I never had you.
Welcome back into the Beatle years. I'm J.J. Jackson, continuing now our discussion with Geoffrey Giuliano, author of Lennon in America. It's our opinion that this book is written in a style that resembles nothing more than sensational tabloid journalism. For instance, in the prologue, the reader is led to believe that the author has first-hand knowledge of John's sexual encounter with his mother. The text reads, and I quote, "Arriving around 11, John parked his bike by a bush outside the kitchen door and strode in. Calling out Julia's name, he navigated his way under the clothesline hung with various items of her intimate apparel," unquote. Then we move on to, quote, "John?" A cheery voice called back, "I'm in the bedroom." Standing in the doorway, young Lennon exchanged pleasantries with his mother as she rose from her bed and, playfully grabbing him by the hand, led him to the edge of the mattress while she sank down on top of the covers. "Lay down with me, my love," she whispered. "I haven't seen you in days. How's school?" unquote. As the story continues, it gets even more outrageous. Quote, "Then soundlessly, Julia reached over and placed John's hand on her breast. A jolt of native electricity went through the boy as he felt his mother slightly lift her body at his touch. It was a moment far too frightening and too real for the sensitive young man to ever forget." End quote. Now, before this interview with Geoffrey took place, Fred Lindgren, the writer and producer of this program, had advised Giuliano that the Beatle years has had access to these same tapes for many years. We just found nothing of merit worth airing until now. That whole scenario was sculpted from this John Lennon audio entry dated September 5th, 1979. In our minds, John was just mulling over a common Oedipal teenage moment. Listen now and see if you agree.
I was just remembering the time when I had my hand on my mother's hip in number 1 Blomfield Road in off Mather Avenue near Garston. That's when I was about 14. Took a day off school. I was always doing that and hanging out in her house. And we were lying on the bed and I was thinking, I wonder if I should do anything else. And it was a strange moment because I actually had the hots, as we say, for some rather lower class female that lived on the opposite side of the road. But I always think that I should have done it, presuming she would have allowed it.
Another sultry fact dredged up in the prologue is the revelation that while in Hamburg, John allowed Stu Sutcliffe to go down on him. And where did that bit of information come from?
Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to Strawberry Field.
It came from an acid trip that took place in Surrey at Derek Taylor's house. There is a slight description of this in the book 50 Years Adrift from Genesis Publications, in which they talk about this really heavy-duty acid, and Lennon talks about it, and Lennon remembers as well, so it's verified in those two places, that Lennon took this really heavy acid trip at Derek Taylor's house and kind of broke down. You know, he just, the way acid breaks you down, not that he had a breakdown, but it just kind of really opened him up, and it got a little rough there for a while. And he was going on about some of these things, and I made friends with Derek Taylor in 1983 when I was living at Lakes Larry Smith's house in Hambleton, which is like a mile from Henley-on-Thames, and yes, a mile from George's house as well. And I became just a little peripherally friendly with Derek, and we had a few phone conversations, and in one of them he told me this story. So, there you go.
And here's John Lennon's audio portion from that memorable Rolling Stone magazine interview. It starts off with John answering the question of if he had ever had any bad trips.
Oh yeah, I had many. Jesus Christ. You know, I stopped taking it because of that, you know, I mean, I just couldn't stand it, you know. And yeah, it got like that. But then I dropped it for I don't know how long. Then I started taking it just before I met Yoko again. Derek came over, and see, I got a message on acid that used to destroy your ego, and I did, you know. I was reading that stupid book of Leary's and all that shit, you know. We're going through a whole game that everybody went through, and I destroyed myself, you know. And I was slowly putting myself together after Maharishi and that, bit by bit over a 2-year period. And then I destroyed my ego, you know, and I didn't believe I could do anything, you know. And I let Paul do what he wanted and say, them all just do what they wanted. And I just was nothing. I was shit, you know. And then Derek tripped me out at his house after he got back from LA. He said, it's all, you know, it's all, and he sort of said, you're all right. And he pointed out which songs I'd written. And, you know, he said, you wrote this and you said this and you are intelligent, don't be frightened, you know. And then next week, I went down with Yoko and we tripped out again, and she filled me completely to realize that I was me and it's all right, you know. And that was it.
True to Jeff's word, the Derek Taylor acid trip reference is there, but no mention of a breakdown or talk of Stu Sutcliffe. Plus, in our cache of Derek Taylor interviews, including the one about his book 50 Years Adrift, he makes no mention of any of this. And since Derek is no longer with us to believe this story, we have to rely on a phone call that cannot be substantiated.
Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry.
Listen, I've always said this. Why should anyone believe me? First of all, this book isn't me. It's John. And you know what? This book is John's, I feel, last chance for the truth about his life to be told. I mean, is it so terrible that he might have, once when he was really lonely or drunk or something, liked a guy to go down on him? Or that when he was in real pain, he put a needle in his arm sometimes? I mean, John was a fertile ground. He was very influenced by everyone he met. You know that. And here's a guy that was very, very complicated. And I think it's marvelous that from this deeply torn, complicated man, this beautiful flower of his work, which was a plea for peace. Not that John had found peace, or that, you know, somehow possessed peace, or was responsible for making peace in the world, but that was his plea for the world. I wish there would be a world of peace and love and brotherhood and all that. I mean, I think it's a much more touching and human portrait to see that this kind of screwed up kid from suburban Liverpool that was shunted from relative to relative and anti to anti, you know, kind of mirrored his angst and his yearning and his raw native talent in this wonderful body of work. And who cares if he was here? Who cares where people stick their dick? I don't care.
Then why bother bringing it up at all? For example, another tabloid tidbit made in the prologue of Lennon in America is that John had a sexual encounter with Linda McCartney in the summer of 1969. Many of you fans on various Beatles chat lines have said that Geoffrey credits that story to Lennon's diary. Giuliano takes issue with you all.
There isn't, and I never said there is. You got to read the book. That did not come from John Lennon's diaries. It came from this place. There was a guy that worked for the Lennons called George Spearin. And George Spearin was told by John about this. And John thought it was very funny. And Spearin was gay. And Spearin used to call me up sometimes. I'm not gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And I used to talk to him. And I don't know what he wanted, but I know what I was interested in, finding out a little bit about the whole Lennon machine up there at the Dakota, Studio One. And he worked there for a long time. And he told me about this, and one time when I was in New York, I questioned him on it, just like anybody would. Come on, how do I know this and that? And he said, all right, well, let me show you. And he went to a filing cabinet, he pulled out a paper, and it was in John's own handwriting, and it chronicled the whole thing. And that's exactly what I say in my book. Now, is that absolute? You can carve that in stone and, you know, put it in court and put my head in the guillotine and it comes down if John didn't screw Linda McCartney? I don't know. I'm telling you that that's what somebody who was in a position to know both Lennon and had told me. And that beyond that, I saw in John Lennon's own handwriting, which I promise you, intimately familiar with, a kind of a novella, two and a half page novella about this incident. Was John lying? I don't know, maybe. You know, it's like this guy in the Buffalo News said, well, how do we know this is true? I say, my answer to that is, how do you know anything's true? I mean, people say it, and then you put it down on paper. You do your best to check it and cross-check it. I had two sources there. I saw a written source that I saw and an eyewitness to whom John Lennon talked about it. To me, that's good enough. And I don't, make more of it than that in the book. And anyway, is it that hard to, again, is it that big a leap for us, folks? What did Linda say when she first got with Paul? Well, it was John I was attracted to. And who was Yoko attracted to initially? Paul McCartney.
Don't let me down.
For us, it's a giant leap to make, for several reasons. George Spearin is just a peripheral character years removed from the alleged incident. Plus, it's the first we've ever heard that Yoko was attracted to Paul. And finally, in the summer of 1969, John and Yoko, along with Julian and Kyoko, were involved in a car crash in Scotland. When John returned for the Abbey Road sessions, Yoko was always present. In fact, due to her injuries and the fact she was pregnant, John had a bed moved in the studio so she could stay off her feet. I'll have some final thoughts of my own, plus more from Geoffrey Giuliano, when the Beatle Years returns. I'm J.J. Jackson, back at you on the Beatle Years. Though Geoffrey's book is full of many indisputable facts, there are still many that cannot be proven. Lennon in America seems to draw most of its negative information from either people who have died or who have a personal grudge against Yoko Ono and the Lennon estate. In fact, it appears the author seems to have it in for Yoko.
I do have it. There's no seam. There's not a seam. Let me take that illusion away right away, that I have it in for you. Seems like you have it in for... Yeah, no, I do have it in for Yoko Ono, but not unfairly. Not without merit. You find me anybody that doesn't have an ongoing financial interest with their relationship with Yoko Ono, that still likes her, and whatever, I'll give you whatever. I don't know. I mean, this woman she just takes the cake. I have a letter that is from David Warmflash, Yoko's attorney, that he wrote to Norman Birch, John's uncle. And I have a copy of it. I'll show it to anybody, anytime, anywhere. Just get in touch with me. I'll fax you a copy if you don't believe me. And it says, Dear Mr. Birch, he was in his 80s at this point. This was after John died, around 83, 84. You have enjoyed the premises purchased for you and your family by John Lennon for many years now. However, and I'm just paraphrasing, and Mrs. Lennon now desires to wrap up all the loose ends regarding the Lennon estate in England, and therefore we have decided to sell the home. You've enjoyed the property for many years, and we will give you first right of refusal to buy this property. However, if that is not forthcoming, then you'll have to leave. Sincerely, David Warmflash. And again, I am paraphrasing, but that's basically what it said, and I just saw the letter last night, so... She was trying to evict John's 83-year-old uncle from a house that John saw fit to purchase for him during the height of Beatlemania, and his wife Harry, and his half-sisters Jackie and Julia. Harry died, Jackie and Julia had moved out, and this old man had nowhere to go. As a matter of fact, he was crying when he showed me the letter, and he said to me, I had a nice house, and John begged me and pleaded with me, sell the house, don't worry about it, you just come live here, and just go to the whatever interior decorators, and they'll fix it all up. And he did it. And he said, I sold my house. And I said to John, well, I'll put the money in the bank. He said, no, just spend the money, you're not going to need it, it'll be okay. And so then Yoko comes, well, Yoko needs that extra £50,000 that she's going to get for this little cottage in suburban Liverpool, very close to Penny Lane. And, this is the Yoko Ono that I know. This is the one that many of us know. A covetous person who likes money above all.
The best things in life are free, but you can keep them for the birds and bees. Now give me more.
Well, the majority of us do love money, including John Lennon. And if that story is true, we're not equipped to explain the motive behind the decision. And as cruel as it may seem, it's really none of our business. The only advice we can offer is that if you read this book, be very careful to examine where some of the most incriminating quotes come from. Still, Geoffrey stands by his account.
I believe that I know that this book is truthful. And, I'm a human being dealing with words. So is it, the same as if God spoke the Bhagavad Gita 5,000 years ago to his charioteer Arjuna? No, I'm just a person. But I really, really tried to do the best work that I could do. And I stand by this book 101%.
We know for a fact that Yoko Ono, Sean and Julian Lennon, Elliot Mentz, nor any of the surviving Beatles was directly interviewed for this book. In fact, Beatles spokesperson Jeff Baker considers Lennon in America to be nothing more than, quote, complete and utter crap, unquote. And what was Geoffrey's response to this negative review?
1, 2, 3, 4.
My response is that Jeff Baker is a former Fleet Street entrepreneur, writer that worked for the biggest rags on Fleet Street. He would know crap better than anyone because he's written enough of it. He was caught in a bold-faced lie when Linda McCartney died by the media and admitted it. He works for the Beatles and gets paid lots and lots of money to come out with those kind of statements. So I don't think we can really trust his impartiality. But I'll tell you what, Mr. Baker, you want to come over to my house, we'll sit down together, and I'll play you these tapes in which John talks about having sex with his mother, talks about the idea of suicide being somewhat attractive, talks about his own sexual proclivities. I'll show you the photocopies of the letters in his own handwriting to various people intimate to him. I'll play you the 37 key interviews that I've done with the principals in John's life, and I mean the principals, his friends, his family, his co-workers, children, wives, everything else. I'll show you the diaries. I'll let you read through those, and if you still think it's a load of crap, which you will because it's in your financial interest for it to be so, then whatever. Have a nice life, Jeff. But, the bottom line is, I guess what we're going to have to do, folks, is wait for the Beatles anthology to get the true story on the Beatles, right? Yeah, that's going to be a real hard-hitting book, I'll have to read that one in a rubber room because it'll be bouncing off the walls. It's so soft. But don't worry, Jeff, because my next book, Revolution, The Secret History of the Beatles, is going to take up all the slack that the Beatles anthology, just somehow neglected to cover, and perhaps we can talk again at that time.
Perhaps. However, it is our opinion that it's a crying shame that John Lennon is no longer with us to answer his accusers. After listening to countless interviews with John, many shared with you, we know for a fact that Lennon never shied away from a question. And as far as the accusation that Yoko was responsible for Paul's drug bust in Japan, Beatles spokesperson Jeff Baker says, and we can't directly quote him, but it went something like this: BS, absolutely B-F-N-S. It is also our opinion that even though John became a bigger-than-life public figure, he should still be entitled to keep his private life private. Yes, he had his flaws, and don't we all? Having said that, after speaking with those privy to Lennon's journals, it's obvious to us that a lot of creative license was used to stretch the truth to fit this somewhat dismal portrayal of a man who meant so much to so many.
Come together right now over me.
Hello, I'm J.J. Jackson. This week, Geoffrey Giuliano, author of the controversial biography Lennon in America, is our guest. Supposedly based in part on John Lennon's personal journals, we try to find out if the book is a truthful representation or a complete fabrication based loosely on fact. Be sure to tune in so you don't miss your chance to decide for yourselves on the Beatle Years from Westwood One.